Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that might surprise you. The Bible isn't just about spiritual matters. It's actually one of the most detailed economic documents from the ancient world, filled with stories of incredible wealth, bizarre currencies, and business deals that would make modern Wall Street traders blush. You think cryptocurrency is weird? Wait until you hear about biblical money. Most people imagine biblical times as this simple, pastoral world where everyone was poor and money didn't matter much. That couldn't be further from the truth. The ancient Near East was a sophisticated economic powerhouse, with complex banking systems, international trade networks, and wealth accumulation strategies that would be familiar to any modern entrepreneur. Some of these people got so rich it would make today's billionaires look like they're playing with pocket change. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, especially those of you settling in for some historical education before sleep. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're about to explore a world where temple treasuries held more gold than most modern nations, where a single business deal could set your family up for generations, and where the line between sacred and profitable was surprisingly thin. The weight of silver, understanding biblical currency. You're standing in a marketplace in ancient Jerusalem, around 950 BCE, and you need to buy grain for your family. But there's no paper money in your leather pouch, no coins jingling in your pocket. Instead, you're carrying small pieces of silver that have been carefully weighed on a balance scale. This is shekel, not a coin, but literally a unit of weight, about 11.5 grams of precious metal. The word shekel comes from the Hebrew root meaning to weigh, and that's exactly what every transaction involved. You'd approach the grain merchant, and both of you would produce your scales. The merchant would place standard weights on one side, often carved stones or metal pieces that had been certified by temple authorities, while you place your silver on the other side. The whole process could take several minutes, with both parties scrutinizing the balance to ensure fairness. But here's where it gets interesting. Silver wasn't just currency, it was an investment commodity. Smart merchants didn't just accept any silver. They looked for purity markers, often tiny stamps or scratches that indicated the metal's quality. Some silver pieces bore the marks of well-known refiners, making them more valuable than unmarked pieces of the same weight. You're essentially trading in precious metal futures every time you buy bread. The really wealthy didn't carry their silver around at all. They had what we might call credit accounts with temple treasuries or trusted merchants. These early banks would issue what amounted to promissory notes, clay tablets, or papyrus documents, stating that the bearer was entitled to a certain weight of silver from the issuing authority. International merchants used these proto-checks to conduct business across vast distances without the risk of carrying actual precious metals through bandit-infested trade routes. What's fascinating is how this system created the world's first currency manipulators. Dishonest merchants would use scales with slightly off-balance weights, skimming tiny amounts of silver from every transaction. Over hundreds of deals, this could amount to significant wealth. The practice became so common that the Bible repeatedly condemns false weights and measures. This wasn't just moral instruction, it was ancient consumer protection law. The temple authorities tried to standardize the system by creating official weights, often carved from hard stone and kept in secure locations where merchants could come to verify their scales. But even this system had its problems. Different regions used slightly different weight standards. So a shekel in Jerusalem might be 11.5 grams, while a shekel in Damascus was 12.2 grams. Savvy traders learned to exploit these regional differences, buying silver in one area and selling it in another for automatic profit. You can imagine the complexity of major transactions. When King Solomon purchased cedar wood from Lebanon for his temple project, The payment didn't involve handing over a sack of coins. Instead, it required carefully weighing out literally tons of gold and silver, with representatives from both kingdoms present to verify every measurement. These transactions could take days to complete and required teams of trained weighers and accountants. The psychological impact of this system was profound. Every financial transaction required you to physically handle and evaluate precious metal, making you acutely aware of money's intrinsic value. You couldn't just swipe a card or hand over paper. You had to engage with the actual substance of wealth. This created a fundamentally different relationship with money than we have today. For the wealthy, this system offered opportunities that modern banking can't match. Since silver and gold were international currencies, a rich merchant in Jerusalem could travel to Egypt, Persia, or Greece and immediately conduct business without currency exchange. Their wealth was portable, universally recognized, and inflation-proof. No wonder the Bible describes faithful stewardship of these metals as a pathway to lasting prosperity. The system also created the world's first precious metal dealers, specialists who made their living buying and selling different types of silver and gold, evaluating purity, and maintaining the weights and measures that made commerce possible. These men often became incredibly wealthy, serving as the backbone of ancient international finance. Temple banking, the original Wall Street. You're approaching the Jerusalem Temple complex at sunrise. But you're not coming to worship. You're here to make a deposit. The temple isn't just a religious center. It's the most sophisticated banking institution in the ancient Near East. And its financial operations would make modern banks look simple by comparison. The temple treasury is a massive stone chamber built into the heart of the complex, protected by thick walls and armed guards who never leave their posts. Inside, you'd find row upon row of carefully labeled storage jars, each containing different types of precious metals, jewelry, and valuable commodities. But this isn't just storage. It's an active financial institution, offering services that won't be seen in Europe for another 1,000 years. The priests who run these operations are essentially the world's first investment bankers. They accept deposits from individuals and businesses, offering what amounts to interest payments in the form of temple privileges or shares in agricultural ventures. If you deposit a significant amount of silver, you might receive regular payments of wheat, oil, or wine from temple-owned lands. The temple has vast agricultural holdings worked by servants and volunteers, creating steady income streams that allow them to pay returns on investments. What makes this system brilliant is its integration of religious and economic life. Your deposit isn't just financially protected, it's divinely guaranteed. Robbing the temple treasury isn't just theft. It's sacrilege punishable by death. This divine insurance policy makes the temple the safest place to store wealth in the ancient world, and people travel hundreds of miles to take advantage of it. The temple also serves as the ancient world's primary currency exchange. Merchants arriving from Egypt with gold, Phoenicians carrying silver, or Mesopotamians with copper ingots can all convert their wealth into locally accepted forms. The priests maintain detailed knowledge of exchange rates across the known world, updating their calculations based on information brought by traveling merchants and diplomatic missions. But the temple's most sophisticated service is what we might call ancient investment banking. The priests pool deposits from multiple investors to fund large-scale projects, trade expeditions, agricultural ventures, even infrastructure development in distant cities. They act as general partners, using their religious authority to negotiate deals and resolve disputes, while individual depositors become limited partners sharing in the profits. Consider how this worked with King Solomon's legendary trading expeditions to Ophir. The text describes ships returning with gold, silver, precious stones, and exotic goods. But they don't mention that much of this wealth came from temple-backed investment pools. Wealthy individuals could invest in these expeditions without the risk of traveling themselves. While the temple used its international religious connections to secure favorable trading agreements in distant ports, the priests maintained incredibly detailed records of all these transactions, using a sophisticated accounting system that tracked not just the amounts of precious metals involved, but also their purity, source, and current market value. These records were kept on durable materials, clay tablets, copper sheets, and specially prepared parchments, and stored in multiple locations to prevent loss. The temple also pioneered what we now call fractional reserve banking. They didn't keep all deposited wealth in their vaults. Instead, they loaned out significant portions to creditworthy borrowers while maintaining enough reserves to meet normal withdrawal demands. This allowed them to generate income from idle deposits while providing credit to merchants and farmers who needed capital for their operations. International letters of credit were another temple innovation. A merchant in Jerusalem could deposit silver with the temple and receive a sealed document authorizing him to withdraw an equivalent amount from affiliated temples in Damascus, Babylon, or Memphis. This system eliminated the danger of carrying large amounts of precious metal on long journeys while facilitating international trade on an unprecedented scale. The temple's loan operations were equally sophisticated. They offered different types of credit arrangements: seasonal loans to farmers secured by future harvests, trade financing for merchant expeditions, and even what amounted to mortgages on real estate and livestock. Interest rates varied based on risk, with well-established merchants receiving better terms than newcomers to the business. Perhaps most remarkably, the temple maintained what functioned as an ancient credit rating system. They kept detailed records of borrowers' payment histories, business reputations, and family connections, using this information to evaluate creditworthiness and set appropriate interest rates. A merchant with a perfect repayment record might receive loans at 10% annual interest, while a riskier borrower might pay 25% or more. The scale of these operations was staggering. Nebuchadnezzar finally conquered Jerusalem. His forces seized temple treasures, worth millions of dollars in today's currency, and that was after years of war had depleted the reserves. At its peak, the Jerusalem temple treasury probably held more liquid wealth than many modern national banks. Abraham's wealth strategy, the ancient art of diversification. You're traveling with Abraham's caravan across the dusty plains between Mesopotamia and Canaan. And what strikes you isn't the religious significance of the journey, it's the sophisticated business operation surrounding you. Abraham isn't just a wandering nomad following divine guidance. He's running one of the most successful diversified enterprises in the ancient world. And his wealth accumulation strategy would impress modern investment advisors. The caravan stretches for miles, with over 300 armed servants protecting thousands of animals, trade goods, and family members. But this isn't just transportation. It's a mobile business empire built on principles that Wall Street still follows today. Abraham has diversified his wealth across multiple asset classes, geographic regions, and economic sectors in a way that protects him from any single catastrophic loss. His primary assets are livestock, sheep, goats, cattle, and camels. But these aren't just animals. They're self-reproducing capital investments. A successful flock doesn't just maintain its value. It grows exponentially through natural breeding while providing steady income through milk, wool, and meat. Abraham's herders are essentially portfolio managers, making decisions about breeding, grazing locations, and market timing that directly impact the family's wealth. But Abraham's genius lies in his geographic diversification. He doesn't keep all his livestock in one region where drought, disease, or political upheaval could wipe out everything. Instead, his animals are spread across hundreds of miles of territory, managed by trusted servants who move the herd seasonally to optimize grazing and minimize risk. When famine strikes Canaan, his Egyptian holdings provide security. When political troubles arise in Egypt, his Mesopotamian assets remain safe. The trade goods accompanying the caravan represent another layer of diversification. Abraham's servants carry luxury items, spices, incense, precious stones, and finished goods that can be sold at premium prices in urban markets. But they also transport staples like grain, oil, and wine that provide steady income and can be bartered for other necessities. This combination of high-risk, high-reward luxury trades balanced with stable commodity trading creates a portfolio that performs well in any economic environment. Abraham's human resources strategy is equally sophisticated. His 318 trained servants aren't just employees. They're stakeholders in the enterprise. Many have been with the family for years, developing specialized skills and deep loyalty that can't be bought with wages alone. Some function as regional managers, overseeing distant operations with minimal supervision. Others serve as diplomats and negotiators, using their master's reputation to secure favorable trading terms and political protection. The family's approach to real estate is particularly clever. Rather than buying large estates that would tie up capital and create security risks, Abraham negotiates grazing rights and seasonal access to water sources across vast territories. He builds relationships with local rulers and tribal leaders, often cementing these partnerships through strategic gifts and mutual defense agreements. This gives him access to resources across hundreds of square miles, without the massive capital investment that land ownership would require. Abraham's financial relationships demonstrate sophisticated understanding of ancient banking principles. He maintains accounts with temple treasuries in multiple cities, spreading his liquid assets across different institutions and currencies. When he needs to make a large purchase, like buying the cave of Machpelah for Sarah's burial, he can access funds immediately without disrupting his ongoing business operations. The family's risk management extends to political and military considerations. Abraham's armed servants aren't just protection against bandits. They're a private army capable of influencing regional politics. When his nephew Lot is captured by enemy kings, Abraham mobilizes a military force that successfully rescues the prisoners and recovers substantial treasure. This demonstration of power enhances his reputation and creates deterrent effects that protect future business operations. Abraham's international network of relationships functions like a medieval guild system. He maintains trading partnerships with merchants from Egypt to Mesopotamia, sharing information about market conditions, political developments, and business opportunities. These relationships often span generations, with sons inheriting not just their father's wealth but also their business connections and reputation. The seasonal nature of the business creates natural cash flow management opportunities. During abundant periods, surplus livestock and agricultural products can be converted to precious metals and stored in temple treasuries. During lean times, these reserves can be converted back to essential goods or used to purchase distressed assets from less prepared competitors. Abraham's approach to inheritance planning shows remarkable foresight. Rather than simply passing on accumulated wealth, he's building systems and relationships that will continue generating income for future generations. His servants learn not just to follow orders, but to make independent decisions that serve the family's interests. His trade relationships are structured to transfer smoothly to his heirs, ensuring business continuity beyond his lifetime. Perhaps most importantly, Abraham understands that wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about influence and security. His financial success gives him the resources to protect his family, influence political decisions, and maintain the freedom to pursue his religious calling without economic constraints. He's created a business model that supports both material prosperity and spiritual purpose, a balance that remains challenging even today. Joseph's economic revolution, ancient futures trading and market manipulation. You're standing in the royal granaries of Memphis, watching as thousands of workers measure, record, and store grain under the supervision of Joseph, Pharaoh's chief economic advisor. But what you're witnessing isn't just ancient storage logistics. It's the world's first large-scale commodities futures operation. a systematic manipulation of agricultural markets that would make modern hedge fund managers take notes. Joseph's 7-year grain storage program represents the most sophisticated economic intervention in recorded history. Using what he claimed was divine revelation about coming famine, he convinced Pharaoh to implement a 20% tax on all agricultural production during abundant years. This wasn't just taxation. It was the creation of a massive government-controlled commodity position that would generate unprecedented profits during the predicted shortage. The scale of this operation is staggering. Across Egypt's vast agricultural regions, new granaries are being constructed with advanced preservation techniques that can store grain for years without significant spoilage. These aren't simple warehouses. They're climate-controlled storage facilities using ancient ventilation systems, moisture barriers, and pest management techniques that ensure the stored grain maintains its quality and market value over time. Joseph's team of administrators functions like a modern agricultural commodities trading desk. They maintain detailed records of regional harvest yields, monitor weather patterns across the Nile Valley, and track grain prices in international markets. This information allows them to optimize storage locations, predict regional shortages, and time their market interventions for maximum impact on both prices and political stability. The genius of Joseph's system lies in its integration of economic and political objectives. By controlling Egypt's grain supply, he's not just generating wealth, he's creating a strategic weapon that can influence international politics. Neighboring kingdoms that depend on Egyptian grain exports suddenly find themselves dealing with a monopoly supplier who can use food security as a diplomatic tool. When the predicted famine begins, Joseph's position becomes clear. Egypt is the only nation with substantial grain reserves, and Joseph controls their distribution. Foreign kingdoms that previously viewed Egypt as just another trading partner now find themselves negotiating with the regional superpower. The economic leverage translates directly into political influence, with Egypt dictating terms to desperate neighbors. The pricing strategy Joseph employs would be familiar to any modern monopolist. During the early stages of famine, he releases grain at moderate price increases, establishing Egypt as a reliable supplier and encouraging dependence. As conditions worsen and alternatives disappear, prices rise dramatically. By the peak of the crisis, people are trading livestock, land, and even their personal freedom for Egyptian grain. Joseph's operations extend beyond simple commodity trading into what we might call agricultural derivatives. He doesn't just sell grain at current prices. He negotiates complex deals involving future harvests, land rights, and ongoing tribute arrangements. Foreign kingdoms agree to long-term trade relationships, favorable taxation treaties, and military alliances in exchange for guaranteed grain supplies. The domestic impact of Joseph's policies is equally dramatic. Egyptian farmers initially benefit from the 20% grain tax because it's collected during abundant years when prices are low. But as the famine progresses and grain becomes valuable, these same farmers find themselves selling their remaining stocks to the government at below market prices, then buying back processed grain at premium rates. Joseph implements what amounts to a controlled economic collapse of Egypt's private agricultural sector. As famine continues, farmers exhaust their reserves and begin selling their livestock to purchase government grain. When their animals are gone, they sell their land. Finally, they sell themselves and their families into government service in exchange for continued food supplies. Within a few years, Pharaoh owns virtually all private land and controls a massive workforce of agricultural servants. This systematic acquisition of private assets represents one of history's most successful wealth transfers from individuals to state control. Joseph has used advanced knowledge of economic conditions to position the government as the ultimate beneficiary of a predictable crisis, converting temporary market disruption into permanent political and economic advantage. The international aspects of Joseph's operation are equally sophisticated. He establishes what amounts to permanent trading posts in foreign capitals, staffed by Egyptian administrators who monitor local conditions and facilitate ongoing grain shipments. These outposts function as both commercial enterprises and intelligence-gathering operations, providing Egypt with detailed information about political developments, military capabilities, and economic vulnerabilities across the region. Joseph's record-keeping system support this massive operation with accounting methods that won't be seen again for centuries. His administrators maintain detailed inventories of stored grain, tracking not just quantities, but also quality ratings, storage locations, and expected shelf life. They monitor regional price variations, customer payment histories, and political risk factors that might affect future deliveries. The long-term impact of Joseph's policies extends far beyond the immediate famine response. By the time normal weather patterns return, Egypt has become the dominant regional power with unassailable economic advantages. The kingdom controls vast agricultural lands, commands a large workforce, maintains substantial precious metal reserves from grain sales, and has established permanent influence over neighboring territories. Perhaps most remarkably, Joseph has created what economists would recognize as a classic market corner, gaining control over the supply of an essential commodity during a period of inelastic demand. The profits from this operation fund Egypt's emergence as a regional superpower, while the political relationships established during the crisis provide lasting diplomatic advantages that will influence Middle Eastern politics for generations. Solomon's trade empire, ancient globalization, and luxury markets. You're walking through the bustling port of Ezion-Geber on the Red Sea, where King Solomon's merchant fleet is being loaded for another expedition to the legendary land of Ophir. But this isn't just ancient exploration. You're witnessing the world's first truly global luxury trading operation, a sophisticated business network that spans 3 continents and generates wealth that would make modern multinational corporations envious. Solomon's approach to international trade represents a quantum leap beyond his predecessor's regional operations. Rather than simply trading with neighboring kingdoms, he's established a maritime empire that reaches from Spain to India, with regular shipping routes, permanent trading posts, and exclusive supplier relationships that give Israel monopolistic control over the ancient world's most valuable luxury goods. The ships departing Ezion-Geber are marvels of ancient engineering, designed specifically for long-distance cargo hauling in challenging ocean conditions. These aren't simple coastal vessels. They're deep-water ships capable of carrying tons of precious cargo across thousands of miles of open ocean. The crews include not just sailors, but also navigators trained in celestial positioning, linguists who speak the languages of distant trading partners, and armed guards prepared for both piracy and hostile port authorities. Solomon's most lucrative trade route is the famous Ophir expedition, which historians believe reached either East Africa or India. These voyages, undertaken every 3 years, return with cargoes worth millions in today's currency: gold, silver, ivory, precious stones, exotic woods, spices, and even live animals like peacocks and apes. But the real genius lies in Solomon's monopolistic control over these goods in Mediterranean markets. The king has negotiated exclusive trading agreements with his foreign partners, often sealed with diplomatic marriages, military alliances, and shared infrastructure investments. When Solomon's ships dock in foreign ports, they're not just welcomed as traders. They're received as representatives of a valued strategic partner. This diplomatic protection allows his merchants to negotiate better prices, access premium goods, and establish permanent facilities that reduce future operating costs. Solomon's domestic market manipulation is equally sophisticated. By controlling the supply of luxury goods entering the Mediterranean region, he can manipulate prices to maximize profits while maintaining customer demand. Rare spices that cost small amounts in their countries of origin sell for literally hundreds of times their purchase price in Jerusalem. Damascus, or Tyre. The markup on precious stones and ivory is even more dramatic. The king's overland trade operations complement his maritime ventures through what amounts to ancient vertical integration. Solomon controls not just the ships that transport goods, but also the caravan routes, port facilities, and urban markets where products are ultimately sold. His network of trading posts, strategically located along major commercial routes, functions like modern distribution centers, storing goods, facilitating transactions, and collecting market intelligence. Solomon's relationship with the Queen of Sheba represents more than diplomatic pageantry. It's a sophisticated business negotiation between two major trading powers. Sheba controlled crucial overland routes between India and the Mediterranean, while Solomon dominated maritime access to the same markets. Their famous meeting likely involved complex agreements about territorial boundaries, shipping rights, and profit-sharing arrangements that would influence international trade for decades. The king's construction projects served dual economic and political purposes. The temple and royal palace aren't just monuments to divine glory and royal power. They're also massive economic engines that employ thousands of craftsmen, consume enormous quantities of important materials, and demonstrate Israel's wealth to international visitors. Foreign dignitaries who come to admire Solomon's architectural achievements return home as informal marketing agents for Israeli luxury goods. Solomon's mining operations represent another dimension of his economic empire. The copper mines at Timnah produce not just raw materials for domestic use, but also finished goods for export. Israeli metalworkers, using advanced smelting techniques, create bronze and copper products that command premium prices in foreign markets. The king has essentially created an ancient industrial economy that adds value to raw materials rather than simply exporting them. The administrative complexity of Solomon's trading empire requires innovations in ancient management and communications. The king maintains a network of governors, administrators, and commercial agents across his territory and in foreign trading posts. These officials use standardized accounting methods, regular reporting schedules, and sophisticated courier systems to coordinate operations across vast distances and time delays. Solomon's approach to risk management demonstrates remarkable business sophistication. He diversifies his trading operations across multiple routes, products, and partners to minimize the impact of any single disruption. When political problems arise in one region, alternative routes and suppliers can maintain cash flow. When particular products face market saturation, new luxury items can be introduced to maintain profit margins. The king's monetary policy supports his trading operations through what amounts to ancient quantitative easing. The massive influx of gold and silver from his trading expeditions increases Israel's money supply, stimulating domestic economic activity while funding continued expansion of the commercial fleet. This creates a positive feedback loop, where trading profits finance larger operations that generate even greater returns. Solomon's legacy extends far beyond his lifetime through the permanent commercial relationships and infrastructure he established. The ports, warehouses, trade routes, and business partnerships he created continue generating wealth for Israel long after his death. His model of combining political power with commercial expertise becomes the template for successful ancient kingdoms throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. Perhaps most significantly, Solomon demonstrates how luxury markets can generate disproportionate profits compared to basic commodity trading. By positioning Israel as the exclusive supplier of exotic goods to wealthy consumers across the ancient world, he creates a business model that depends on scarcity, exclusivity, and sophisticated marketing rather than simple supply and demand economics. The merchant princes of Tyre, ancient corporate networks, and maritime monopolies. You're standing on the docks of ancient Tyre, watching as Phoenician merchant ships navigate the narrow channel between the mainland and the island city. But what surrounds you isn't just a busy port. It's the headquarters of history's first truly global corporation. a maritime trading network that spans the Mediterranean and beyond, generating wealth through monopolistic practices that would make modern tech giants seem quaint by comparison. The Phoenicians of Tyre have created something unprecedented in the ancient world, a business model based entirely on controlling information, transportation networks, and specialized manufacturing rather than controlling territory or agricultural production. Their wealth comes not from what they produce, but from what they know and where they can go that others cannot. The purple dye industry represents Tyre's most famous monopoly, but the scale of this operation reveals sophisticated understanding of luxury market psychology. The Murex shells used to produce Tyrian purple are found throughout the Mediterranean, but the Phoenicians have developed exclusive processing techniques that create superior color fastness and intensity. More importantly, they've convinced customers across the ancient world that authentic purple can only come from Tyre. The dyeworks scattered around the city represent an early form of industrial manufacturing, with specialized workers performing specific tasks in a production process that takes months to complete. Thousands of shells must be harvested, processed, and refined to produce enough dye for a single royal robe. The Phoenicians have calculated that this labor-intensive process, combined with their marketing expertise, allows them to charge prices that are literally worth more than their weight in silver. But Tyrian merchants understand that monopolies require constant protection and innovation. They maintain trade secrecy through what amounts to ancient corporate espionage, while simultaneously developing new products and markets that reduce dependence on any single revenue source. Purple dye may be their most famous product, but it's just one element in a diversified portfolio that includes metalwork, glass production, textiles, and luxury goods from across the known world. The Phoenician approach to geographic expansion represents the world's first franchise business model. Rather than conquering territory through military force, they establish independent trading colonies that maintain commercial relationships with the mother city while operating as autonomous business entities. Cities like Carthage, Cadiz, and dozens of smaller settlements function as branch offices of the Tyrian trading empire. Each colony specializes in particular products or markets based on local conditions and opportunities. Spanish settlements focus on silver mining and metalwork. North African posts concentrate on ivory and exotic animals, while Sicilian operations emphasize agricultural products and ceramic manufacturing. This specialization allows the network to maximize profits while minimizing direct competition between different Phoenician settlements. The Phoenicians have also pioneered what we might recognize as ancient venture capitalism. Wealthy Tyrian merchants provide financing for independent traders and craftsmen, taking equity stakes in their operations in exchange for capital, market access, and business expertise. These partnerships allow rapid expansion of the trading network without requiring direct management of every operation. Maritime technology gives the Phoenicians crucial competitive advantages that they protect jealously. Their ships are faster, more durable, and capable of carrying larger cargoes than vessels built by competing civilizations. More importantly, their navigational techniques allow them to sail in conditions and reach destinations that other merchants consider impossible. They've developed detailed charts of currents, winds, and seasonal weather patterns that function as trade secrets worth enormous sums. The Phoenicians' relationship with biblical Israel demonstrates sophisticated understanding of diplomatic commerce. Rather than competing directly with Solomon's luxury trade operations, they position themselves as essential partners who provide services that Israel cannot duplicate. Phoenician craftsmen build Solomon's temple and palace, while Phoenician merchants handle the complex logistics of importing exotic materials and coordinating international construction projects. This partnership model extends across the Mediterranean, with Phoenician merchants serving as intermediaries between civilizations that might otherwise be unable or unwilling to trade directly. They speak multiple languages, understand different currency systems, and maintain relationships with rulers across vast geographic regions. Their reputation for reliability and fair dealing becomes a valuable business asset that generates repeat customers and referral business. The banking and credit services offered by Phoenician merchants represent another innovation in ancient finance. They provide letters of credit that allow merchants to conduct business across vast distances without carrying physical currency. A trader in Spain can deposit silver with Phoenician agents and withdraw equivalent value in Egypt months later, with the Phoenicians earning profits from currency exchange, interest charges, and investment of temporarily idle funds. Tyrian record-keeping systems support these complex operations through accounting methods that track not just current transactions, but also long-term credit relationships, inventory values, and market trends across multiple locations and currencies. Phoenician bookkeepers maintain detailed information about customer creditworthiness, seasonal demand patterns, and regional price variations that allow their merchants to optimize timing and routing of trading expeditions. The Phoenicians have also developed what amounts to ancient market research capabilities. Their extensive network of trading posts and commercial relationships provides them with early warning about political developments, agricultural conditions, and economic trends that might affect business operations. This intelligence allows them to adjust their strategies, avoid dangerous situations, and exploit opportunities that less well-informed competitors cannot detect. Risk management in Phoenician operations involves sophisticated diversification strategies that spread potential losses across multiple ventures, geographic regions, and business partners. No single ship carries all of a merchant's wealth. No single route provides all of his income, and no single product represents his entire inventory. This approach allows Phoenician traders to survive setbacks that would destroy less careful competitors. The cultural impact of Phoenician commercial success extends far beyond economics into the realm of technological and intellectual diffusion. As they travel between civilizations, Phoenician merchants carry not just goods, but also ideas, techniques, and innovations that accelerate development across the entire Mediterranean region. Their alphabet becomes the foundation for writing systems throughout the ancient world, while their measurement standards, legal practices, and business methods influence commercial development for centuries. The price of faith, temple economics, and religious capitalism. You're entering the outer courts of Herod's temple in Jerusalem during Passover, surrounded by thousands of pilgrims from across the Roman Empire. But what strikes you isn't the religious devotion, it's the intense commercial activity. That makes this sacred space one of the most profitable business districts in the ancient world. The temple isn't just a place of worship. It's a sophisticated financial institution that generates enormous wealth through a combination of religious obligation and commercial innovation. The money-changing tables that line the court of the Gentiles represent much more than simple currency exchange. These operations function as the ancient world's most exclusive banking franchise, with temple authorities licensing specific merchants to provide essential financial services to pilgrims who arrive carrying dozens of different currencies from across the Roman Empire. The exchange rates aren't just based on metal content. They include substantial markups that generate steady income for both the money changers and the temple administration. Temple taxes create a massive, non-voluntary revenue stream that would make modern governments envious. Every Jewish male over 20 years old, regardless of where he lives in the world, owes an annual half-shekel tax to support temple operations. This isn't just local taxation. It's international fundraising on an unprecedented scale, with collection networks extending from Spain to Mesopotamia. The logistics of gathering, transporting, and securing this wealth require sophisticated administrative systems and armed courier services that rival any commercial operation. The sacrificial animal trade represents one of history's most successful examples of creating artificial market demand through religious requirements. Temple authorities have established detailed regulations about which animals are acceptable for different types of offerings, with inspection standards so stringent that most pilgrims cannot risk bringing animals from home. Instead, they must purchase certified sacrificial beasts from approved vendors who operate under temple licensing agreements. The markup on these animals is extraordinary. A dove that might cost a few copper coins in a rural market sells for silver in the temple courts. The price differential reflects not just transportation costs and quality certification, but also the captive market psychology that develops when religious obligation meets monopolistic supply control. Pilgrims who have traveled hundreds of miles for religious festivals will pay virtually any price rather than leave without completing required sacrifices. Temple storage and banking operations dwarf those of any contemporary institution. The sacred treasury contains not just accumulated tax revenues, but also private deposits from wealthy individuals who trust the temple's security more than any commercial alternative. These deposits earn returns through the temple's investment in agricultural land, trading expeditions, and lending operations that function parallel to the institution's religious activities. The temple's real estate holdings represent a diversified investment portfolio that generates steady income independent of religious donations. Temple authorities own agricultural land throughout Judea, commercial properties in Jerusalem and other cities, and livestock operations that supply both sacrificial animals and products for general sale. This diversification protects the institution from economic fluctuations while providing multiple revenue streams. International pilgrimage creates seasonal economic booms that benefit not just the temple, but the entire Jerusalem economy. During major festivals, the city's population swells dramatically, creating demand for lodging, food, transportation, and various services that local businesses plan their entire year around. The temple authorities have learned to coordinate with local merchants to maximize the economic impact of religious tourism while maintaining the spiritual character of the celebrations. The priestly families who control temple operations have developed what amounts to hereditary corporate management, with different families specializing in particular aspects of the complex enterprise. Some focus on financial management, others oversee agricultural operations, and still others handle international relationships and diplomatic functions. This specialization allows for professional expertise while maintaining family control over the most profitable positions. Temple lending operations serve both religious and commercial purposes through innovative credit arrangements that comply with biblical prohibitions on charging interest to fellow Jews. Rather than direct interest charges, temple loans often involve profit-sharing agreements, collateral arrangements, or service contracts that generate returns while maintaining technical compliance with religious law. These creative financial instruments allow the temple to function as a major creditor while preserving its spiritual authority. The temple's relationship with Roman authorities demonstrates sophisticated political economy that protects Jewish religious autonomy while accommodating imperial taxation requirements. Temple administrators have negotiated agreements that allow them to collect and manage their own revenues while meeting Roman expectations for political loyalty and tax compliance. This balance requires constant diplomatic management and substantial financial resources devoted to maintaining favorable relationships with Roman officials. Quality control in temple operations extends beyond religious requirements to encompass commercial standards that protect the institution's reputation and profitability. Sacrificial animals must meet not just ritual purity standards, but also physical quality standards that ensure customer satisfaction. Money-changing operations are monitored for accuracy and honesty, while banking services maintain strict confidentiality and security protocols that encourage wealthy depositors to trust temple financial management. The temple's charitable activities, while religiously motivated, also serve important economic functions by maintaining social stability and community support for the institution. Regular distributions of food to the poor, support for widows and orphans, and emergency assistance during times of crisis create public goodwill that protects the temple's commercial privileges and reduces political opposition to its economic advantages. International networking among Jewish communities creates unique business opportunities for temple-affiliated merchants and financiers. Religious connections facilitate commercial relationships across vast distances, with temple-endorsed traders receiving preferential treatment in Jewish communities throughout the Roman Empire. These networks provide market intelligence, credit facilities, and business partnerships that generate substantial profits while serving legitimate religious purposes. The temple's educational activities support its economic operations through training programs that produce skilled administrators, accountants, and commercial specialists who understand both religious requirements and business practices. The institution functions as an ancient business school that produces graduates who establish successful careers in commerce, while maintaining loyalty to temple interests and contributing to its continued prosperity. Babylon's banking revolution, credit, interest, an ancient financial innovation. You're walking through the commercial district of Babylon around 600 BCE, past the offices of Morocco and Sons, one of the most successful banking houses in the ancient world. But what you're seeing isn't primitive money lending. It's a sophisticated financial institution that offers services remarkably similar to modern banks, complete with checking accounts, business loans, investment partnerships, and even something resembling modern mortgage arrangements. The Babylonian approach to banking represents a quantum leap beyond the simple precious metal storage and exchange services offered by most ancient institutions. These banks actively lend money for productive purposes, invest in commercial ventures, and provide complex financial services that facilitate international trade and large-scale economic development. The interest rates they charge, typically 20% annually for silver loans and 33% for barley loans, reflect both the risks involved and the substantial profits available from successful lending operations. Morrissey's client records, preserved on thousands of cuneiform tablets, reveal the scope and sophistication of ancient banking operations. The firm maintains accounts for hundreds of customers, ranging from small farmers to wealthy merchants and government officials. They track not just account balances, but also credit histories, collateral valuations, and complex partnership arrangements that allow multiple parties to pool resources for major investments. The banking house serves as intermediary for what amounts to ancient investment banking, bringing together investors with surplus capital and entrepreneurs with promising business opportunities. A typical arrangement might involve several wealthy individuals providing funds for a major trading expedition, with the bank managing the legal documentation, monitoring the investment's progress, and distributing profits according to predetermined agreements. Real estate financing represents one of the most innovative aspects of Babylonian banking. Rather than requiring full payment for property purchases, banks offer what we would recognize as mortgage, allowing buyers to acquire land or buildings with partial down payments and extended repayment terms. These arrangements are secured by the property itself, with banks developing sophisticated legal procedures for foreclosure and resale when borrowers default on their obligations. Agricultural lending demonstrates how ancient banks supported productive economic activity rather than just facilitating consumption. Banks provide seasonal loans to farmers who need funds for seeds, tools, and labor before harvest time, with repayment scheduled to coincide with crop sales. These loans are often denominated in barley rather than silver, allowing farmers to repay with their actual production rather than having to convert crops to precious metal in potentially unfavorable market conditions. The international scope of Babylonian banking operations reflects the cosmopolitan nature of the empire and the sophisticated communication networks that connect different regions. Banks maintain correspondent relationships with institutions in other cities, allowing customers to conduct business across vast distances without physically transporting large amounts of precious metal. A merchant in Babylon can authorize payment to a supplier in Damascus through interbank credit arrangements that settle accounts periodically through precious metal transfers. Partnership arrangements offered by Babylonian banks demonstrate remarkable creativity in structuring complex business relationships. Banks serve not just as lenders, but as general partners in commercial ventures, providing both capital and management expertise in exchange for predetermined shares of profits. These partnerships often span multiple years and involve detailed contracts that specify each party's responsibilities, profit distribution formulas, and procedures for resolving disputes. The bank's approach to risk management involves careful evaluation of borrowers' creditworthiness, diversification of lending across multiple sectors and geographic regions, and maintenance of substantial reserves to handle unexpected losses. Bank managers develop expertise in evaluating different types of collateral, from real estate and livestock to trade goods and business equipment, allowing them to make informed decisions about appropriate loan terms and security requirements. Babylonian banks also function as ancient insurance providers, offering contracts that protect merchants against various types of losses during trading expeditions. These early insurance policies cover risks ranging from theft and shipwreck to political upheaval and currency fluctuations. The banks calculate premiums based on their extensive knowledge of trade routes, political conditions, and historical loss rates, creating profitable risk management services for their commercial clients. The legal framework supporting Babylonian banking operations represents sophisticated commercial law that protects both lenders and borrowers while facilitating complex financial transactions. Contracts specify precise terms for interest calculations, collateral requirements, and default procedures, with standardized language that reduces ambiguity and supports efficient dispute resolution. The banking system operates within well-established legal precedents that provide predictable outcomes for various types of financial arrangements. Record-keeping in Babylonian banks demonstrates advanced administrative capabilities that support complex multi-party transactions and long-term financial relationships. Bank clerks maintain detailed accounts of all transactions, with careful tracking of interest accruals, collateral valuations, and payment schedules. These records are preserved on durable clay tablets that create permanent documentation of financial obligations and business relationships. The bank's investment in human capital reflects understanding that successful financial operations require skilled personnel who can evaluate opportunities, manage risks, and maintain customer relationships. Senior bank officials often come from established commercial families with extensive business experience, while junior staff receive training in accounting methods, legal procedures, and commercial practices that prepare them for advancement within the banking industry. Babylonian banking houses also serve as information clearinghouses that collect and distribute market intelligence across their extensive networks. Bank officials maintain detailed knowledge of commodity prices, political developments, and economic conditions throughout the empire, providing valuable consulting services to their clients while using this information to guide their own investment and lending decisions. The social impact of Babylonian banking extends beyond immediate commercial benefits to encompass broader economic development that increases prosperity throughout the empire. By providing credit for productive investments, banks enable agricultural improvements, commercial expansion, and technological innovation that create employment opportunities and increase overall economic output. The widow's might and ancient poverty. Economics of survival in biblical times. You're sitting in the court of women in the Jerusalem temple, watching as a poor widow approaches the treasury boxes with her small offering. But what you're witnessing isn't just a touching story of religious devotion. It's a glimpse into the harsh economic realities faced by the most vulnerable members of ancient society, where survival often depended on complex social networks, charitable institutions, and economic strategies that have largely disappeared from the modern world. The widow's 2 small copper coins, worth less than a day's wages for an unskilled laborer, represent not just religious sacrifice, but careful economic calculation. In a society without social security, unemployment insurance, or public welfare programs, her survival depends on maintaining relationships with religious and community institutions that provide essential support services. Her offering, small as it is, serves as both spiritual expression and practical investment in networks that she desperately needs. The economic vulnerability of widows in ancient times reflects legal and social structures that provided women with limited independent economic opportunities. Upon her husband's death, a widow's access to property, business relationships, and even basic necessities often depended on male relatives, who might have their own financial pressures and competing obligations. Without sons to support her or brothers-in-law willing to provide protection through levirate marriage, a widow faced potential destitution despite having lived comfortably during her marriage. Ancient charity systems, while often inadequate, represented sophisticated approaches to poverty management that combined religious obligation with practical social policy. The Jewish tradition of gleaning rights allowed poor people to gather overlooked grain from harvested fields, providing them with basic nutrition while creating incentives for property owners to maintain productive agricultural operations. These arrangements created mutual dependencies between rich and poor that helped maintain social stability. Temple-based charity operations demonstrate how religious institutions functioned as ancient social service agencies. The temple maintained regular distributions of food to registered poor families, provided emergency assistance during times of crisis, and offered various forms of support to vulnerable community members. These programs were funded through religious taxes and voluntary offerings, creating redistributive mechanisms that transferred resources from wealthy donors to needy recipients. The economics of day labor, which provided employment for many poor people, involved intense competition for irregular work opportunities that offered minimal security and often inadequate compensation. Workers would gather in public places before dawn, hoping to be selected for construction projects, agricultural work, or various temporary assignments that might provide enough income to feed their families for a few days. The parable of workers in the vineyard reflects these harsh realities, where unemployment was a constant threat and fair wages were often difficult to secure. Debt slavery represents one of the most brutal aspects of ancient economic life, where poor families could lose their freedom through inability to repay loans or meet financial obligations. Children might be sold into slavery to satisfy their parents' debts, while adults could find themselves bound to creditors for years of unpaid labor. The Jubilee year provisions in biblical law, which theoretically canceled debts and freed slaves every 50 years, offered hope for eventual liberation but provided limited protection against immediate economic crisis. Subsistence agriculture practiced by poor families involved sophisticated survival strategies that maximize food production, from minimal resources while minimizing risks that could lead to starvation. Poor farmers practiced intensive cultivation of small plots, carefully managed their seed stocks, and maintained complex relationships with neighbors that provided mutual support during difficult periods. These agricultural systems were highly vulnerable to weather fluctuations, pest infestations, and political disruptions that could destroy entire harvests. Urban poverty created different challenges and opportunities, with poor city residents often depending on casual labor, small-scale trading, and various service activities to generate survival income. Street vendors, porters, cleaners, and other service providers operated in highly competitive markets where profit margins were minimal and customer bases were often unstable. Success in these activities required strong social networks, detailed knowledge of local markets, and ability to adapt quickly to changing economic conditions. Women's economic strategies in patriarchal societies involved creative approaches to generating income within severe legal and social constraints. Some women operated small businesses from their homes, producing textiles, prepared foods, or craft items for local markets. Others provided services like midwifery, nursing, or domestic work that utilized traditional female skills while generating modest income. These activities were often informal and unregulated, providing flexibility but also limiting growth potential and legal protection. The role of extended family networks in poverty management cannot be overstated. With complex systems of mutual obligation that provided essential safety nets for vulnerable members. Successful family members were expected to support poor relatives, while poor members provided labor and services that contributed to overall family welfare. These arrangements created both security and dependency relationships that could span generations and geographic distances. Religious festivals and celebrations provided important economic opportunities for poor people through increased demand for various goods and services. During major holidays like Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, poor families could earn extra income through food preparation, lodging services, transportation assistance, and various forms of temporary employment that served the needs of visiting pilgrims and local celebrants. Charitable giving by wealthy individuals represented both religious obligation and social investment that created patron-client relationships benefiting both parties. Wealthy donors gained social status and religious merit through their generosity, while poor recipients received essential support that could mean the difference between survival and destitution. These relationships often involved ongoing obligations and expectations that extended far beyond simple monetary transactions. The psychology of poverty in ancient times involved different attitudes toward wealth and social status than those common in modern societies. Poor people often accepted their economic condition as divinely ordained or naturally inevitable, focusing their efforts on survival and maintaining dignity rather than pursuing upward mobility. This acceptance could provide psychological comfort while also limiting efforts to change economic circumstances through individual or collective action. Community support systems in ancient villages and urban neighborhoods created informal welfare networks that provided assistance during times of crisis while maintaining social cohesion and shared values. Neighbors would contribute food, labor, and other resources to help families facing temporary difficulties, with the understanding that such assistance might be reciprocated when circumstances changed. These systems worked most effectively in stable communities with strong social bonds and shared religious or cultural traditions. The economics of apocalypse, wealth, power, and the end times in Revelation. You're standing in the port city of Ephesus around 95 CE, watching Roman merchant ships load luxury goods while reading John's Revelation. And suddenly, the apocalyptic imagery takes on startling economic meaning. The Babylon the Great, described in these prophetic visions, isn't just spiritual symbolism. It's a sophisticated critique of the Roman economic system that generated unprecedented wealth for a small elite while creating devastating inequality and exploitation throughout the empire. The merchants of the earth who weep over Babylon's destruction aren't abstract figures. They're the incredibly wealthy trading families who controlled Mediterranean commerce under Roman protection. John's list of their merchandise reads like an ancient luxury goods catalog. Gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linens, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, aromatic woods, ivory products, exotic spices, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and most tellingly, the bodies and souls of men, a direct reference to the massive slave trade that provided labor for Roman economic expansion. The economic system John critiques operates on a scale that dwarfs anything previously seen in human history. Roman trade networks span 3 continents, moving goods from Britain to India, from Germany to Ethiopia. The port cities mentioned in Revelation, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamon, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, are major commercial centers where enormous fortunes are made through international trade, manufacturing, and financial services that serve the empire's voracious appetite for luxury consumption. The mark of the beast that prevents people from buying or selling without proper identification reflects the reality of Roman economic control systems. Citizens need official documentation to participate in major commercial transactions, while non-citizens face severe restrictions on their economic activities. The imperial cult, which requires acknowledgement of Caesar's divine status, becomes intertwined with commercial licensing and business permissions, forcing Christians to choose between religious conviction and economic survival. John's description of Babylon's luxury consumption reveals the staggering wealth inequality that characterizes Roman society. The elite consume goods worth more than an entire nation's annual production. Purple cloth that costs more than most people earn in their lifetimes. Spices transported from the edges of the known world. Precious stones and metals that represent the accumulated wealth of conquered territories. This consumption isn't just personal indulgence. It's a display of power that reinforces social hierarchies and political control. The great city that rules over the kings of the earth operates through what we might recognize as economic imperialism, controlling subject territories through trade relationships, debt arrangements, and resource extraction rather than direct military occupation alone. Local rulers maintain their positions by facilitating Roman commercial interests, while their populations provide both markets for Roman goods and sources of raw materials that feed the empire's manufacturing and luxury industries. The sudden destruction of this economic system, described in Revelation as occurring in 1 hour, reflects the fragility of complex commercial networks that depend on political stability, secure transportation routes, and continued consumer confidence. When the system collapses, the effects cascade rapidly through interconnected markets, wiping out accumulated wealth and disrupting established patterns of production and exchange that have developed over centuries. The kings of the earth who participate in Babylon's wealth represent client rulers who have prospered by integrating their territories into the Roman economic system. These leaders gain personal wealth and political power by facilitating Roman commercial interests, often at the expense of their own populations who bear the costs of resource extraction, taxation, and economic exploitation that benefits distant Roman elites rather than local communities. John's vision of the New Jerusalem presents a radically different economic model where the city's wealth comes not from exploitation and trade, but from divine abundance that eliminates scarcity and competition. The city's walls are built of precious stones, its streets paved with gold, and its gates made of single pearls, not to display wealth, but because these materials are so abundant that they serve utilitarian purposes. This represents an economy of abundance rather than artificial scarcity. The river of life flowing through the New Jerusalem creates perpetual fertility and productivity without the labor exploitation that characterizes earthly economic systems. The trees bearing fruit every month provide constant nourishment, while their leaves offer healing for the nations, suggesting an economy based on regeneration and restoration rather than consumption and depletion of finite resources. The absence of a temple in the New Jerusalem carries economic implications as well as religious ones. Temples in the ancient world were not just places of worship, but major economic institutions that collected taxes, stored wealth, managed investments, and facilitated trade. The elimination of temple-based economics suggests a system where spiritual and material needs are met directly rather than through institutional mediation and control. The nations that bring their glory and honor into the New Jerusalem participate in a form of international economy that doesn't involve exploitation or domination. Instead of tribute extracted through military force or economic coercion, these contributions appear to be voluntary offerings that celebrate cultural diversity while contributing to shared prosperity. This presents a model of globalization based on cooperation rather than competition. John's economic vision critiques not just Roman practices, but the fundamental principles underlying most ancient economic systems. The concentration of wealth among elites, the exploitation of labor, the extraction of resources from subject populations, and the use of artificial scarcity to maintain social control. The alternative he presents challenges basic assumptions about how economies must function and what constitutes legitimate wealth creation. The timing of John's vision, written during a period of relative economic prosperity in the Roman Empire, makes its economic critique particularly significant. Rather than writing from a position of obvious economic crisis, John presents his alternative vision during a time when the Roman system appeared successful and stable, suggesting that the problems he identifies are inherent to the system, rather than temporary difficulties that might be resolved through reform. The merchants' lament over Babylon's destruction reveals their complete dependence on the existing economic system and their inability to imagine alternatives. Their wealth, status, and identity are so thoroughly integrated with the exploitative economy that they cannot conceive of prosperity based on different principles. This psychological dimension of economic critique suggests that systemic change requires not just new policies, but fundamental shifts in how people understand wealth, value, and human relationships. The ultimate message of John's economic vision is that systems based on exploitation and inequality are inherently unstable and will eventually collapse under their own contradictions. While sustainable prosperity requires economic relationships based on justice, abundance, and mutual care rather than competition, scarcity, and domination, this economic theology presents both warning and hope for any society struggling with similar issues of wealth concentration and systematic exploitation.